Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Uh, it is my honor tonight to actually have Craig I almost said Frey,
You almost yes.
on the channel. Now, many of you probably already know, but if you don't, Craig has done the special effects for our first episode, Legacy, and then he did the special effects for our Ties That Bind preview, and then finally he did the effects for Crosses to Bear. And I think Craig is amazing. I think he's really amazing, and uh, I can't express enough how appreciative I am for what you've done for Valiant. Because honestly, we couldn't have done it without you, and
That
you've been just so generous, and I
that
really appreciate that.
that appreciation goes right back to you, Michael, for asking me to do it in the first place. Honestly, I know we told a little bit of the story on the Starship Valiant website, about how I felt when you first asked me.
Yeah, I was
You
actually
know,
going to ask you about that. Do you remember that?
yes, I do. I do. Pretty well actually. I remember getting the message from you because I was still posting my CG animations on YouTube at the time. It was before I left YouTube. And you had messaged me about Starship Valiant, and I hedged a little bit because I
Yeah,
had
I knew
been.
you were leery.
Yeah, well, leery isn't that's a strong word, but I was hesitant because I'd been part of other fan films before that never got completed, and it was doing a lot of work for something that people just
Yeah,
gave up on. And I was like, do I really want to do that again? But I decided, you sent me a script, and I don't remember. It was something that hasn't been produced. I don't know if you
mm,
planned, but it was a script for some other story, and I really liked it a lot. And I thought, okay, I like this enough that I'm willing to give this one more shot. And then if it doesn't work, I'll just, keep doing my stuff on my own. But, I am so glad that I said yes, because it's been such a fun ride so far.
what
It really has.
the interesting thing about it all was that uh, well, when I wrote the script for Legacy, I thought, man, who am I going to get to do the visual effects? And I thought, I'm going to go on YouTube and look at some of the guys that do Star Trek animations, and maybe I'll just ask one and see if they respond. And I actually asked about probably three. You're probably the fourth one. And
Mm-hmm.
I heard from maybe one other person, and he said that he would really like to do it, but uh, he felt like it would take him a long time, and that he wouldn't have it done before we would have the film ready.
Right.
So he felt like he would hold the film back. So he just said, no, I don't think I can do it. And I went to your page and I looked at, seems like I remember an animation of, what's the name of the ship that you are really fond of?
The
Uh,
Starbird.
yes. I
Yes.
saw I think the animation, were the animations, they were up at that
Yeah.
time, weren't they?
Yeah, they were. Yeah.
Yeah. And I thought those look cool.
Yeah.
And yeah, I sent you a message. And I remember you saying that you had been involved in other fan films that never came to be. And I can imagine, you put a lot of work. I don't know if people really think about the work that goes in the CG, because it can be pretty grueling, and it's a lot of work. So I can
Yeah.
understand you saying, well, I don't want to get halfway or complete all this and then the guy not finish it. I mean, that's totally understandable.
Right. Yeah. And then, like I said, I'd been through that before, and it was always really disappointing. And yeah, people don't realize that, the kind of, what you need to put in to these things, because they see the end product. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just like the whole fan film itself.
Yeah, that's
Um,
the whole story behind the story. I mean,
exactly. It's like they see the finished product, but they don't see everything that went into making that story happen. So it's an
yeah.
end product, and it's like, oh, okay, there it is. But it's like trying to, but the whole, like choreographing, ship movements and who's firing on who, and where ship A is going in relation to ship B, and how they interact. It can take a lot of work, and I've pulled my hair out several times trying to get things to go the way I want them to go. But I enjoy doing it, and I really love doing it for Starship Valiant. It's
You
been
know,
very fulfilling.
I would say, just for my own curiosity, the obvious question I would ask you is, how did you get involved in visual effects?
I will
When did
try
it
to
start?
I will try to condense this story as much as possible.
Okay.
It started in 2004. A friend of mine worked for a graphics company that was going out of business, and the owner of the company said to the employees there, basically, take what you want. We're shutting down. Take what you want. So of course, he grabbed his laptop, which was his own, but he grabbed a lot of computer programs that they were using as well. And one of them was a program called 3D Studio Max.
Hmm.
And of course, that's a computer generated, effects program.
Well, that still exists today, correct?
Yes, it does. Yeah, I don't know what version they're on now. The first, that at that time, 2004, they were on either 3D Studio Max 3 or 4. You know,
Hmm.
um, but it was licensed to this company, and so he grabbed the discs and took them home with him, and then brought them over to my place and said, "I've got this. You've got to see this." And he loaded it up onto my system. Since it was under the company name, the license was already paid for and everything. So I basically got it for free. And as soon as I saw what it was and what it could do, that was it. I was hooked.
Is
And
is is that program still pretty much used for visual effects today?
not as much as it used to be, um, because it was one of the first ones out there. But now there are ones like Lightwave, that's, I believe,
Yes, I've
that's,
heard.
yeah, that's open source. It's free to use for anybody, and apparently has, you have much greater control over your environments. I tried learning it a while ago, and I couldn't figure it out. Its user interface is, to me, extremely complex. So I couldn't, I just kind of stayed away from using it. I didn't want to go through another learning curve like I did with 3D Studio Max.
So when you got the program loaded up on your computer, had you used that program before
Never,
and you
never even
taught
looked at it.
yourself that program all by yourself?
Yeah, that and going to
Wow.
like half price books and getting
Wow.
books, books on 3D Studio Max and searching YouTube for tutorials and things like
Wow.
that. And that's how I did it. And there were a lot of late nights, whereas like right after dinner, I'd turn on the computer and start it up, and then I would be there till like 2 in the morning,
Well,
just
it's like
playing around.
if I had that software, it would take me a year to build a ball. I,
Well,
I
luckily,
I I cannot imagine not knowing anything about that software and then designing a starship on it.
yeah,
I can't. That
it,
just
it
sounds.
it was very intimidating. It really was, because I was always a fairly artistic person, but this was a completely new format for me. Entirely computer based. I wasn't using a pencil or a pen and paper and stuff like that. It was all mouse clicks and things like that. And that took a great deal of getting used to. But once I did, um, once it started clicking, then it was happening very, very, very fast. And well, I sent you some of the early animations that I did that sometimes I really cringe looking at, knowing I could
What?
do a lot better today. But I didn't send you because I don't have them anymore. Like the very first ones I did, that where I had very little control over any aspects of the program, and I was just testing things just to see what they did.
Do
So
those animations still exist or?
no, they do not.
No.
they,
So
yeah,
how long would you say it took you to actually learn the program?
I'm still learning it. Honestly, I only scratched the surface of what the stuff that I have done for Starship Valiant, as complex as it looks. and as it is, really only scratches the surface of what 3D Studio Max can do. There is
You
so
know what?
much more.
And certainly there is a growth in your animation from when you started with Legacy till say when you did the Pride of the Fleet. Like the animations in the Pride of the Fleet are just like beautiful.
Yeah. Well, I'm always looking for ways to improve what I do. Just like you guys. It's like you're always looking for ways to, you know, make it a little bit better than you had been, than it had been. And that's what I do all the time. Is like if I have time to mess around, I'll just say, okay, what is this aspect of 3D Studio Max doing? Then I'll look and see if it's something I can use, and if it is, then I will learn how to make it, incorporate it into my work somehow. But it's like I said, even with all that stuff, I'm barely scratching the surface. It's an extremely powerful program, you know. Um, but the main thing is, it's also made for using render farms. Having stacks of hard drives somewhere to render different aspects of
Kind of
a
sounds like
scene.
Brady's stack of, he's got like
Exactly.
maybe 8, 9 hard drives sitting on top of each other.
Exactly. Yeah, he mentioned that. He mentioned that when you were talking with him. I saw that, and and so he does. He has a small render farm, and 3D Studio Max works best in those situations. I don't have that. I've got my desktop, which has a ton of memory in it, but even that's not enough for what Studio 3D Studio Max can really do. I'd need about 10 hard drives working on different aspects of it for it to even begin to do the stuff that would be like film, movie quality.
So
So
I don't know if I've ever told you, Craig, but you actually made me cry. Well, we won't say cry, but tear up.
okay,
Did I ever tell you that?
no, you've never told me that, but I hope it's
Well,
for good reasons.
well, this is a rare thing, but I want to say thank you for that. And the thing about Legacy, when we conceived it, we wanted to make a Star Trek fan film, but when it was written and getting there and finishing it, it just seemed like such a long journey. And it seemed like, yeah, we want to do it, but at the same time, it just seems so far away. And
Yeah,
maybe part of me, when we were making it, maybe part of me felt like, I don't even know if we're going to finish this. I mean, I want to finish it, but I don't know. I was kind of like 50-50 sometimes because, like you said, the behind the scenes story is sometimes it's not really pretty.
mm-hmm.
And but I remember once you signed on to do the effects, you had sent a shot. I think one of the earliest shots you sent of the ship was the ship orbiting the planet, like in the original Star Trek, how that one shot where the ship would fly by and orbit the
Just do
planet. And
just to pass by. Yeah,
and I think I still have those on my hard drive somewhere. But that was just so emotional seeing that ship and seeing the name Valiant on it. It just made me tear up. And wow, it was just like, I can't believe it. I can't believe there's a visual effect with the Valiant on it, and that was
it
just it was amazing.
it became real right then.
Yeah,
It's like you guys had those. Yeah, you guys have those incredible sets, which I'm so jealous of that you guys get to play on those amazing, like the bridge set and the transporter room set. Maybe that's something we should explain. You're in Oklahoma and I'm in Pennsylvania,
yeah.
so I've
Everybody's
never
somewhere
been.
else.
Yeah, I've never been down to the studios to see
Well,
the
the
sets
sets
that
aren't
are.
in Oklahoma anymore.
Yeah,
Now
I
they're in
heard you mention
Arkansas.
that. Yeah, you know,
Um,
um, So it's like you and I have actually never met in person. This is the only way we've ever communicated, other than emails and things like that.
so the internet's good for something.
Yes, it is. Yeah, but when you see something like that, with the animation that I sent you, and it's like, you came up with the whole concept of Starship Valiant and what that starship, what that starship means. And when you see it for real, or as real as it's going to get, instead of a physical model, it's a CG model. But when you see it there, I can understand some emotionalism because it's like, oh yeah, that's the ship. There she
Yeah.
is.
And I mean, I put that on my phone and I showed it to everybody. I was just so proud of that. Look at this. Look at this. Everybody's like, who did that? That looks great. Who did it? Craig. At the time, I said Frey,
Frey,
but
yeah. Most people do. Most people do until I correct them. So,
now I
and
know
sometimes I don't bother. But
I sent you a complete script to Legacy, I believe.
yes, you did.
Well, I would have to because you did the effects. Now, Legacy
Yeah.
wasn't really too heavy on effects, I guess, but you did you did quite a bit because you did the opening battle and then you did the ship in dry dock,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's the only shots we had of the ship
Those
in
are really the
Legacy.
only. Yeah, those are really the only two. Woo, kick my camera there. Sorry. Those are really the only two shots. Are the battle at the beginning, and then the ship in dry dock, being repaired at the
Now,
end.
one thing about uh, when we went back to Legacy and we did the special edition, you redid all the effects.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, and I
Yeah,
still I we have a cut. You can see it online of the first effects we used, which were
yeah.
yeah they were pretty different than what you did for the special edition. I would say the special edition effects were probably more dynamic.
And that's something
Uh,
that I was shooting for too. When you said you were going to do a special edition of it, I said, "Let me redo the effects," and you were like, "Oh no, you don't have to." I was like, "Please let me redo the effects,"
oh,
because I saw it a little bit differently by that time. So I was like, I can make this more dynamic. I can make
so
it work
when
with
you
it.
did the effects for the first cut of the film before we did the special edition, were you happy with the effects, your work?
You're always you're always happy with them until a little while later on. I was happy with it. It's not like I felt I sent you anything subpar, but it was if you get the chance to redo something as an artist, and you look at something a little bit later and you go, oh, I wish I had done this, or that doesn't look quite right. That's where I took the opportunity, to say, you know what, I can tick these up just a notch, not necessarily go all like George Lucas with the episodes 4 through 6, stuff, but just turn it up a little bit, give it a little bit more dynamism, a little bit more color, something along those lines, but I was happy with the original effects. Yes, I
I
was,
remember
but
it seems like the only thing that I kind of remember you saying was the first shot of the ship in dry dock. I think you were kind of like that's not how you wanted it to look. Maybe because it didn't really focus on the bridge. It kind of I think it was like
yeah,
just like a maybe it was going for the underside of the ship
no,
when the
actually,
camera closed in.
if I remember correctly, and I had actually intended to re-watch all of the episodes before our talk now, but I didn't get a chance to do that in the lead up to Easter and everything like that. But the original shot was, it kind of came through. If I remember correctly, it kind of came through the dry dock. So you're at first seeing the ship from the outside, and then from outside the dry dock, and the camera comes through it, and then kind of leans toward the bridge. And it wasn't. When I looked at it later, I'm like, it wasn't quite bright enough because it's supposed to be in orbit of the Earth, and I'm like, the sunlight should be much brighter on all of this, and it's a little indirect, since the ship's hidden and everything like that. I thought, now let's make this more of a straightforward, moving straight in on the bridge, because that's where Bishop is.
Well, I got to
I wanted that placement there.
yeah, I don't think I didn't say uh I didn't say anything that I didn't even say that we needed that shot, that it needed to be changed.
Yeah.
But, for the most part, when you did visual effects, I just kind of maybe described in the script how it would be or how it should be visualized. But, you took the lead and you pretty much had the imagination to conceive these shots to where when I saw them, I really didn't request too many changes on what you did. But from a story standpoint, the new shot of the ship in the dry dock, it fit perfectly as far as the story went because, as soon as that camera closes in on the bridge, Bishop comes to the bridge. So it made
Mm-hmm.
sense.
And that's, of course, that's what I was going after. I remember originally, I you know, I asked you a ton of questions, like about what you were looking for and so on and so forth. I mean, you and I did a lot of prep, but you know, I was like, how do you want these shots to break down? What do you want to see here? How do you want things to go? And you were just like, just do it. Just go ahead. Just
Well,
show me something. And I'm like, okay, yeah, because
honestly, I felt like, with Brady and photography, what will work? You know this better than me. And when it came to visual effects, to me, you were the expert. You knew better than I did on how this should look, how this should be done. So I just kind of like stepped back and just let you do what you were going to do, because I kind of just, developed a trust that you know what you're doing better than I do. So
yeah,
I can describe it in the script, but, and
every
there's times in the script when something's uh, specified on how to be, but then you would come along and you would improve on it and make it even better.
oh well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. Well, you know, you want to bring as much as possible to any production, you know, and it's like if I see something in the script and is like, you know what, I think it might work better this way, you
Yeah.
know, and I'll toss an idea out there, and if people want to go, no, that won't work, or no, I don't like that idea, then fine. But I feel like, you know, it's like we might be missing an opportunity here if we, you know, if I didn't say something, if I didn't go, you know what, I think this needs, you know, at least consider this, you know, because I tend to be very visually oriented anyway. And it's one of the things I love about the scripts you send me is I can see them. You know, while I'm reading, I can see so much of what you're writing. It just
Well,
appears in my head.
you're
So
you're a very visual person. And one thing that, is not often too said about visual effects people is that I kind of see it as visual effects artists are storytellers. They tell stories with their art. So, and your vision is just as important as, the person writing the story, because without you, I can't get across what I want. So, I mean, you're
yeah,
very
well,
visual.
then that's where the symbiosis comes in, and working, you know, how it all has to come together. Because even if I'm not going to be necessarily telling my story or a story myself, I'm trying to help you tell yours. So it's like, so that, you know, so yeah, the VFX have to go hand in hand with that. um I think you and Brady talked about this as well, and I was going to bring this up a little bit later, but since it fits in now, one of the favorite effects that I have ever done for Starship Valiant is in Crosses to Bear. um After the second girl dies, and then we see this shot of the outside of the Valiant coming out of warp, and it's almost completely in shadow,
Hmm.
because it as it comes out of warp and passes by the camera, you see it's going into orbit on the night side of a planet. So and that was, I did that deliberately because I wanted the somberness of the previous scene to continue. I wanted my effect to move that forward. And I thought the only way to do this is to have the Valiant almost completely in shadow, have all the light behind it, so that all you're seeing is a silhouette. And then even the planet itself, most of it is in darkness, like they're all mourning the you know, the deaths of these two little girls. And I think you and Brady mentioned it during your talk, and I even think
Yeah.
somebody on one of the people on YouTube, you know, somebody who commented on the video said that. And when I read that, I was like, I did a fist pump, honest to God, because I'm like, that's
Yeah. I mean,
exactly
that,
what I
that
wanted
was
to do.
that visual effect just captured the mood and emotion of that whole scene. And I the first time I saw it, I was just like, that fits so perfect. And sometimes I feel like when you render a visual effect and I see it, I'm thinking somehow you've got an inner thought to know exactly what I want in these films,
I
because
try.
you always seem to do that. And
I try really hard, and at this point, I think you and I know each other well enough That
And Craig, a
yeah,
lot of the times too is that I I I don't feel like it's right to be a demanding person and to say, "Hey, this don't work," blah blah blah, because I look at it as you're doing this for me, and I'm really very appreciative of it, and I want to, and I tell this to Brady all the time. I want to put you guys under the least amount of stress. I don't want to cause you any stress. I just I want you to be yourself, have fun, because if it's not fun, it's not worth doing.
yeah,
And I've
exactly.
always, there's never been a situation with either of you where I felt like, oh my God, this ain't working. God, what am I gonna? I mean, I just appreciate you guys so much, and none of these films could have been done without you, and that's wow, that's just so much appreciation there. I can't even tell you how much I appreciate that.
That really means a lot to me. It does, because I try to I try to put a lot into it. I try to put everything that I have into it because it's like I want I want your vision to you know work as best as it possibly can when you finally upload it. I want it to be as complete as possible, and if I'm part of that process, I'm like, I want these shots to look good. I want them to move the story forward. They shouldn't just be pretty pictures
You actually
because
did quite a few visual effects for Legacy. A lot of them we didn't use,
yeah.
but if I recall, I've got like maybe 5 hard drives, book drives that I keep everything on, and I think those original visual effects are all there. But I mean, I can remember one of the sun coming up over the earth that we didn't
Hmm.
use. Uh, Several dry dock shots that we didn't
Yeah.
use.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, that's another thing that I try to do is I'll give it's like the script will say Valiant and Dry Dock.
well,
Okay, well
there's
I'll do it from this angle, I'll do it from that angle, I'll do it from a third angle, and just let them choose which one they like best. So
There's one you did that shows a close up shot of the near the bridge, and there's a little workers bee flying over the
yeah.
saucer. We ended up using that in the fundraiser video.
Oh
Uh,
really?
you never seen it?
No, I had not seen the fundraiser. Oh
Yeah,
wait, no, I do remember it now.
yeah.
I
We
do
used
remember
that
that one now.
shot, and
Yes,
and that was just a beautiful shot.
yeah.
That was just
I love using those work bees. I
yeah.
really do.
They really just add to the size of the ship. They're so
They
tiny, and the ship's so massive.
they are perfect for scaling how big those ships are, and that's one of the reasons why I like using them. And we forgot, actually, we said there were only 2 effect scenes in Legacy. We entirely forgot about one that's probably, well, you're not supposed to see it, and that's when Bishop is speaking with the Admiral. Everything
Oh
behind her.
yeah, yeah. And that reminds me, there's there's also a shot when Bishop is on the bridge and the dry docks in the on the view screen, and there's a little
Yes.
workers bee that passes by. So yeah,
Yeah.
there's quite a few shots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
So
the,
I would
the,
say that it has a pretty good amount of visual effects. They're really
yeah.
subtle, and we're not going for pizzazz and all this kind of stuff, but uh,
Yeah. I
uh
entirely forgot about the stuff behind the Admiral until just now.
yeah, that's when we see the what is it called, the
The Starbird. Yes, the
Starbird.
Starbird.
Yes, I
Yeah.
remember you. Now that's a ship you created, right?
I did not. I did not create
Oh.
it. It was originally a toy back in the late
Oh yes,
1970s.
yes.
It was
What?
released by Milton Bradley, and it was one of
And
the first electronic toys.
there was no TV show or anything with
No,
that ship.
no, this was
Y-
before all that kind of stuff happened.
I remember that now.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
and I fell in love with this ship because it's just this perfect design. It's this perfect design that's it came in on the wake of Star Wars. You but it's got the really clean lines that you see in ships like like the Enterprise refit. So it doesn't have that messed up kind of junky Star Wars look to it,
Do
but the
you have
shape
an
is
actual
very.
model of that ship?
I have two of them upstairs, as a
Oh,
matter of
wow.
fact.
How big are they?
They're a little over a foot long, something like that. They were
So
much bigger when I was smaller.
is that the actual toy that they sold at
Yes,
the time?
yeah.
And you kept it all this time as a
Well, I didn't own one until much later. I had a friend
Oh,
who
okay.
had one, and I coveted it greatly. I coveted it greatly, and a
You
few
know the
years
rule,
later,
Craig. Thou shall not covet another man's ship, okay?
exactly. But I did. I did. I coveted it. Yeah, and there was a whole line of Starbird things. Actually, there was the Starbird. There was a hyped up version of it called the Avenger. There was an enemy version called the Intruder, and then there was a command base that you could build. It was made. It came in a cardboard box, and the cardboard box was actually the base of the
You,
foundation of the command base.
now that I
So
think about it, it seems like I may have had one of those ships as a kid.
it's possible they were
Maybe
very popular.
yeah, I wonder. I was going to ask you that. Did they? I guess they did pretty good to make all that.
Yeah, they were very, very popular, and I
Um,
loved that. Yeah, I loved that ship's design from day one, and it was one of the first CG models that I built once I got used to 3D Studio Max.
Imagine that a popular kids toy without a television series to promote it. That
I know,
yeah, that wouldn't happen
hard to
today.
believe. No, it wouldn't happen today. Although I'd love to see a TV show with the Starbird in it. That would be
So
great.
you said that you worked on a few projects that didn't get complete. How many of those did you work on?
I think there were like two or three, and really, it's like a lot of times I didn't even get past the real planning stages of them. I received scripts. Some people sent me some models that they wanted to use, in the episodes, and I would start working on things. But I don't think anything ever reached like a stage where they started filming, um, and just didn't get that finished. I don't even think they went that far because, as you well know, trying to gather the people together for what will likely be several weeks of filming is, herding cats is an understatement.
Yeah,
Because even the best intentioned people oftentimes will start out with a great deal of loyalty and energy and say, okay, yeah, we're going to get this done. And then you're 3 weeks into it, and they're like, listen, I've got a job, and then I'm coming here, and we're working till 2 in the morning.
yeah,
I can't, and my weekends, our weekend, it's like I can't keep doing this, and that's understandable. It's disappointing, terribly,
yeah.
but it's understandable. And then there are some people who just give up. It's like you expect them to show and they don't.
Well, from my experience, one of the problems we run into with fan films is that some of the people underestimate how hard it is to make one of these
Exactly.
films. And honestly, Craig, and I've experienced this, where you'll go in to shoot one scene and it seems like a pretty easy scene, but it ends up taking half the day.
Yeah.
And then you'll have people on the outside who've never been in filmmaking and they'll say, I don't understand why this is taking so long. Why is this
Right.
taking so long? So I guess everybody wants to be on film, but a lot of people don't understand just what all goes into it, and it can be hard, it can be frustrating,
Mm-hmm.
and I understand it. We've had people that were scheduled to be in a scene, and they honestly they got tired of waiting and just I
Right.
have to go home, I have to be at work in a couple hours, or so. I mean, it's understandable, but it's I've seen so many Star Trek fan films proposed that never get off the ground. And,
Exactly.
I can understand the desire to want to make a film because, you see these films and you think, well, I want to put my vision of Star Trek. I love Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a lot harder than you think it is.
It definitely is. Well,
And
a
that
friend,
goes for any project, not just Star Trek.
yeah, some friends of mine and I tried back when we were in high school. We tried to make what would have likely been one of the first Star Trek fan films, and we got like the first 2 scenes filmed, and that was it. It's as far as it ever went.
Any
Um,
footage of that?
I'm sure that my friend probably still has, the friend of mine that we were working on it together. I'm sure that he may still have some of that footage. I haven't asked him for it. One, because I really don't want to see myself that young again, um, running around and doing things, and two, its format at the time was standard VHS. There's no way it would hold up to anything. But I did send you the title sequence for it when you were
Ah,
asking for some of my stuff. And even that title sequence was made a long, long time ago when we momentarily thought that maybe we could get that project off the ground again. And by that time, we were all adults. I was married. We all had lives, but we thought, you know what? Let's see if we can maybe do this. And of course, it didn't get done, but I did make that title sequence. Star Trek: The Mutara Sector Incident is what it was called.
ah.
So I had sent that to you, just as because you asked for some of my old stuff, so I sent it along. Um, and we were reviving it because I had the 3D Studio Max, so we had a way to do the effects without using physical miniatures. So for like a month, we were thinking, okay, maybe we can do it, maybe we can get it done, and then we were like, no, we can't.
What
We're just not able to commit that time.
when I think about Legacy, and wow, I remember feeling like a kid in a candy store whenever you would send a zip file with some effects in it. I was just, if I'm at work, I'm just like messed up until I could get home. I couldn't concentrate
Yeah,
on anything until I could get home and see what you sent.
thank you.
But uh, one of the problems I remember having with some of the files that you would send was I think the earlier files were AVIs.
Yeah, they were.
And for some reason, I don't know, it's like I have a different computer now, but back then, every time I would try to play them, they would just like move very slow
Mm-hmm.
for some reason. My computer just did not like AVI files.
Yeah,
And I remember you would have to convert them,
yeah,
usually to Windows files, I believe.
yeah.
But I
Um,
remember I don't know why we had that problem. And then the AVI files were like really huge too.
they were huge, and
Maybe
that's the
that's why
thing.
they were going so slow.
That's why, and that is why they were going so slow. I render all of my effects as AVI files because in and this is for the older version of 3D Studio Max that I'm using now, which is very old. The Windows, if I were to render it as a Windows media file, as a WMV, it would look horrible. It does not convert. It does, it does, when I do a direct render as a WMV, it looks horrible. It gets very pixelated. It's awful.
Is it just a
And
format that the software doesn't work good with?
yeah, I think so. I think that's what it is. It just isn't, it just doesn't, you know, the compatibility just isn't there. So the AVI file is the best way to go, but they are huge files,
But
and they'll
one
move
thing
slow on almost any computer.
one thing about them though is that the files didn't move too much, but that they were just really vivid.
The detail, and see,
Yeah,
that's the
they were
thing about them.
vivid.
Yeah, yeah. So then later on, I was able to find a way to take those AVI files, which were huge, and that's the thing. It's like I would have to send you like 5 or 6
Yeah,
little
you would have.
clips
Yeah, you would cut them up.
into 2 or 3 second things, into 2 or 3 second nuggets, and then you or Brady would have to stitch them together. And but once I found a way to convert those AVI files into WMV files, which keep that high quality, but really drop the file size into something that's manageable. That made things easier for everybody. And I felt bad about that when I was doing those early AVI files because I'm like, I'm sending them 7 tiny little chunks that they then have to stitch back together again. I'm like,
See, I don't
but I've got the whole
remember.
thing.
I don't remember if the original files for Legacy. I mean, I know you ended up converting them, but I don't know, were they actually AVIs and Brady? Because usually I would just
Yeah,
look at them and then I would send them to Brady. So he might have used the actual AVI
he
files
did.
when
He
he put
did.
those effects together. Okay.
Yeah. For Legacy, they were the original AVI files, and I had to send them, like I said, in little packets, one at a time. And it's like, this scene only lasts 10 seconds, but I could only send 2 second snippets. So he'd get 5 separate zip files that he'd then have to edit together. And I felt awful about that. I'm like,
Now,
you know,
for the special edition, though, I don't think you were using AVI files by that point, were you? Or
I
at least if
still,
you were, you weren't sending them as AVIs.
no, yeah, I still render I still render the originals in AVI, but then I convert them. By that time, I had a video conversion system that I could use, to transfer everything from AVI to Windows media files, and that made things so much easier because then I could send complete FX scenes, and they were a fraction of the size what 2 seconds of an AVI file, because when you're rendering it 1920 by 1080, that's a lot,
Yeah.
especially in an animation. That is a lot of information. So those AVI files get really. I remember there were some that I was rendering out that were only a few seconds long that were like 6 or 7 gigabytes in size.
How long were
And
they taking to render?
depending on the complexity, they might take a day or
Wow.
something like that. A little bit more sometimes. That sometimes I was, they were, 2.5 days that I'd be rendering
Wow.
out a scene. Yeah. So,
And
pardon me.
it's strange too because even the effects that Brady used for animals, he would say, "I'm rendering out a file that's going to take about 10 hours," and I'm like
Yeah,
thinking, "My goodness, that's a
yeah,
long time
it is a long time.
for a scene that's only a matter of a few seconds,
A few
man."
seconds long, yeah. And that's another one of the things that most people, your general viewer of these Star Trek fan films, they just don't realize is that those special effects, that scene that you're seeing can take 10, 12, 14, 24 hours to render just
Hmm.
simply because of everything that's going on in there. It's like when you move models in a 3D scene, and I'm sure that Brady would attest to this as well. If you're moving models and they are changing in reference to the key light source, your 3D model software has to recalculate the shadows for every frame. So, say you got the shadow of the bridge and, the second deck coming across the saucer of the Valiant. Okay, you can see a shadow being cast as, say, the ship tilts. For every frame that ship moves, that shadow is going to change in length and width depending on the key light. So 3D Studio Max and any CG system has to recalculate what that shadow is supposed to do for every frame. And it's a lot of math that it has to do for every single frame. And if you've got a 5 second shot at 30 frames per second, well, you're looking at what 150 frames there, so,
What it
and it
almost
has to,
sounds like hand drawn animation.
it is in a lot of ways. It really is, even though a lot of the calculations happen inside the system. It's got to figure out, it's got to do those calculations, it's got to do the math every time for every single frame, and then next frame it's got to do it again. And then if you have a motion blur, it's got to recalculate for the motion blur as well. So a short scene can take a long time to render.
And it seems like I think I'm thinking of the right film, but it seems like on Legacy, one of the challenges that you had was that oftentimes your computer would crash when you were
Oh,
rendering the effects. I remember you telling me so many times about
yes.
issues with computer issues where it
Yeah.
would either freeze up or crash or.
Yeah. There are times where, yeah. And that was my own fault because the system that I was using when we did Legacy didn't really have the memory. And sometimes I would accidentally set a scene too long, and it would render to, yeah, it's like, that was another thing that I would do is like, okay, well, what I've got to do is the scene's 5 seconds long. I would chop it down into, like 1 second segments, let that render finish, and then download it off the system. So I had the memory space, and then do the second, the second part, and then download that off. And there were times where I would forget to, and set the render time too long, and my computer would run out of memory. And when it ran out of memory, it would be like, oh, well, then I just stop. I just
Yeah.
stopped doing what I'm doing. And there were times where it would be hours before I would even notice that that happened, because I'm going about my day and doing other things because it's rendering.
Yeah.
And then
And
I
you're
would
thinking
notice
you're thinking it's rendering while you're out doing something else, and it's stopped.
it stopped. Yeah. And I'm like, boy, it's been on frame 250 for a really long. Oh, no. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like,
That can be really frustrating.
yeah, it is. It is
Yeah.
very, very frustrating because then, because then at that time with the system I was using, it wouldn't even want to shut off, so I could reboot it. It's like I would have to unplug it and pray that it didn't corrupt any files so that I
Well,
could go
even
right back to
amidst
it.
the crashes, your visual effects were done before we were finished with the film, so you were still on time.
I did my best all the time, to try and get things, because that was always very important to me. It's like, well, what good is getting the live action footage finished if you're waiting months for the CG? It's like that doesn't, to me, that doesn't sit well. So while you guys were doing the filming, and sometimes even before that, if you told me a script was a lock and you guys weren't even filming yet, I would be starting on the special
Yeah, you
effects.
were usually ahead of us because you were usually started before we
Yeah,
even started.
yeah,
So I mean, you were almost constantly sending in visual effects shots.
yeah. And if there was, yeah, and this way, if it's like, things don't look quite right, then I can go back and, I have, that gives me time to fix things, and so by the time everything's finished, you've got the finished film footage and you've got the finished CGI or close to it anyway, so that everything can be stitched together at once and the project isn't sitting there for weeks or maybe months while I finish doing my job. I don't think that's fair to you guys. You've already worked so hard to
Yeah.
get the live action stuff finished. You shouldn't have to wait another 6 months for the CG to come in. So,
So speaking of legacy, when you did the opening battle with the now I remember the Stukalon ships. It seems like you maybe had 3 designs that you sent.
yes, I had 3 different designs that I sent. Um,
I
and
don't remember those designs anymore. I remember the finished one, of course, the one we used, but I don't remember the other two.
Yeah.
But I think
Um,
the one we used was the best one. And usually, when you send me a ship, you already have in your mind which one you like. And
yeah.
usually, I think I'm not even going to say usually, but I think we always pick the same one.
Yeah, there was a lot of, there's a lot of serendipity between us from the word go. When because I would have different designs for you.
Now,
And
the Sukalon ship, was that your actual design?
it's a revamp of somebody else's design. They had a much simpler design. That of course, and he had told me that he wasn't going to be using it for anything. So I ended up flipping it upside down and
Oh
then
wow.
just detailing it out the wazoo. So the original shape isn't mine, but just about everything that you see on the ship is, especially since like I said, I flipped it 180 degrees. Um,
You
so
made
that
it your own.
the spires are pointing upwards instead of down. And then I just went nuts on detail.
Yeah, one
So
of the things about that design, I really like that design. I thought it looked. One thing about your designs now is that they always look really functional. They look practical. They look like they could really work.
I,
And I like the fact that when we're doing Valiant, we're not doing Klingons, we're not doing Romulans. The universe is a big place, and we always try to
mhm.
do something that's hasn't been seen before, and your
Right.
designs only add to that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I always try to put some kind of functionality into, into the ships that I'll
Well,
design.
what the audience don't see is how detailed you go in behind the scenes. I mean, people don't know that when they see a ship that you put on screen, they haven't seen the 10 pages of specs that you send me showing me where everything is and how everything works and all of these detailed pictures of the ships like flying and how they work and what this does. I mean, they don't see that, but you really put a lot of thought into your designs.
I really enjoyed sending you all those spec sheets.
I'm
I
still
get such a good I get such a kick out of sending those to you.
Yeah, I mean, you really take pride in what you do. I mean, you're not just just you're making it and you're creating it like you see that it would really work or how it would really work.
Yeah, and I do my best to do that, and that comes from listening to effects artists like Andrew Probert, Doug Drexler, Rick Sternbach, John Eves, Doug Graves. Those people are, you know, saying that they're friends of mine is probably a stretch, but I'm acquainted with all of them. And they've all worked on Star Trek projects. And I've seen, you know, I've seen the work that they put into them, into their designs, and they work really hard to put functionality into these, into anything that they design, especially the ships. And I feel an obligation to do the same thing, because even if you look at Matt Jeffries, who's, he's the biggest inspiration when it comes to ships, in Star Trek. He put everything has a function on the Enterprise. Everything on that ship that you see on the exterior has a function. And so any ship that I might design for Starship Valiant, it's got to be at least at that level. So that even just by looking at it, even if you only see it for a few seconds, you realize, okay, I understand what some of the things on this ship do. Even, without having to be told. Because that's, that just adds to the realism of it, I think. So,
Yeah, and they look so much like TOS designs. That's
yeah,
another thing that's really kind of they don't look out of place at all in the TOS universe.
yeah. And that's another thing I try to strive to do, because the TOS ship designs had a certain look.
It's a look
Very,
that you don't see that look anywhere else. Maybe kind of in the earlier films, the 50s films or 60s,
yeah,
but it's pretty much its own universe.
yeah. Well, the ships on from the original series have a very um, mid-century, just a little past mid-century modern look, if you want to put it into architectural design. They're very utilitarian. They the individual parts do what they're supposed to do, and there isn't a whole lot of fluff, or
You mean
they're
just
not
there's not
overdone.
yeah, there's not things on there that just don't do anything.
Yeah,
Everything's for a reason.
yeah, there aren't
Yeah.
antennas sticking out all over the
Yeah.
place, and little greeblies all over. It's like the ships are very sleek, and and they they fit so well. I keep going back to the Enterprise. That design is amazing. What Matt
Yeah.
Jeffries did, it's just so beautiful and so simple. But it just all came together so perfectly.
Yeah, I think the Enterprise was well, I can remember being a kid watching Star Trek and just falling in love with that ship.
Mm-hmm.
And the funny thing is, when I grew up as a kid, we didn't come from a family that had a lot of money. Uh, and I remember, after seeing that ship, I just wanted a model of that ship
Oh yeah,
so bad. And I tell you, when I finally did, I think the first toy of that ship I had was the die-cast metal one that shot the little plastic discs
the
out of the
Dinky.
saucer.
You
Yeah,
had you had one of the Dinky
yeah.
Enterprises. You know how
And
much those things are worth now?
I have no idea what happened to it, but
Yeah.
I,
Ooh.
I used to, I used to fly that thing and use my imagination. The trees were the planets that the ship was
Mm.
going to, and Wow. I was so happy to have that ship.
Yeah.
I love the Enterprise.
Yeah, when I was very young in the mid '70s, when they first started syndicating Star Trek, and of course that's when I fell in love with it. And like you, I had a family who didn't, we did not have a lot of money. Yeah, but we lived one block down from a hobby shop that was on the main street in
Yeah.
the town where
When
I lived.
when we had hobby shops.
When we had hobby shops,
Yeah,
yes,
we actually used to have model stores,
yeah, and that's what
but
this was.
yeah, those are just gone now pretty
Yeah,
much.
and of course they had all the Star Trek models, and my friends and I would scrape together money, as best we could, and one of us would buy one model. One of us would buy the Enterprise model, one of us would buy the Klingon model, one would buy the Romulan, and and then we'd have parties, if you want to call them that, where we built them, where we built these models, and then we would play with them, and we had so much fun doing that because
Yeah.
that helped make it real.
Yeah, it seemed like when I was a kid, models were big things at the
They
time.
were.
I mean, they were a big part of fandom. I mean, I can
Hmm.
remember going to I don't remember the name of the stores, but stores that had Star Wars models, Star Trek, military planes and tanks and
Right.
ships. I can't remember the last time I actually seen a store like that. I haven't seen, do they even exist anymore?
They do, but you've got to search hard for them. You
And
really do.
the one I used to go to was actually in a mall, and it was a really nice store,
Yeah,
but it
yeah.
not around anymore. But speaking of inspiration, what would you say in terms of sci-fi shows were your inspiration other than Star Trek?
Other than Star Trek,
I know you like Battlestar Galactica, the original.
I like the design. I got to say this. I like the designs for Battlestar Galactica.
You
Of
know,
course, when I was a kid and the show came on, I loved it.
when
I
the
couldn't
show
get
came
enough of
on,
it.
I wanted one of those Vipers and I wanted one of those jackets.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Still want one of the
And
jackets.
and the Galactica, when it would get battered, oh man, it would hurt. That's how
Yeah.
much I love that ship. I love
Yeah.
that ship.
Um,
Yeah, that's pretty much close right up there to the Enterprise. I love the Galactica.
yeah.
Somebody said that the tech in the 1978 Battlestar Galactica seemed like the most functional technology that you would see in terms of the future.
I think
And
in a way, yeah. I mean, because they used a lot, especially like on the command deck of the Galactic, they used a lot of practical things. If you look,
yeah,
there are oscilloscopes all over the place. There was a lot of real hardware on that set. Lots of screens
yeah,
and lots of
it
buttons and
it actually looks like something you can look at and see us building.
exactly,
I mean,
exactly. Yeah. But at the time I loved the show.
yeah,
Now
loved
I
it.
st- I love the imagery of the show. I love the Galactica. I love the design of the Galactica. I love the Vipers. The show itself is a little hard to watch. So sometimes,
There's a few episodes I really like in that series. But it I don't know. I guess it'll always have a soft spot in my heart because I
oh
used
yeah,
to love, as a kid, I loved that show. Loved
yeah,
it.
But
Go- never
Battlestar
never did
Galactica.
never did like Galactica 1980. Never.
No, no, I don't
Never
even.
liked it.
As far as I'm concerned, it doesn't really exist. It was some kind of hallucination that we had.
Yeah, do you have a
Yeah.
model of the flying motorcycles?
No, I don't.
How about a Wolfman
No.
Jack model?
Oh no, I know.
And I
That
like
show is.
Wolfman Jack. I
So do
just didn't
I.
like him in Galactica.
No, no. That show was just a. That was a mistake. But canceling Galactica after its first season was a mistake as
Yeah.
well. So,
Yeah,
but
they got cheap and didn't want to spend the money.
yeah, but Battlestar Galactica was an influence. So was Buck Rogers. I
25th
love.
century.
Yes, the design of the starfighters,
Yeah.
which was originally Ralph McQuarrie designed it as a possible design for the Viper from Battlestar Galactica, but they
Oh, I
didn't
didn't
go
know
with
that.
it. Yeah, they didn't go with that design, but then Glenn Larson used it later when he was developing Buck Rogers. He decided to use that design for the Starfighters, or they called them Thunder Fighters sometimes on the show.
So was it John Dykstra that designed the actual Galactica?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah, he outdid
um,
himself.
yeah. Based on again some Ralph McQuarrie sketches. If you look, if you look online and you look at some of the Ralph McQuarrie
They,
um,
I think I've seen
paintings,
some. They actually look kind of close to the model.
yeah, they are. Only that's everything's a lot sleeker.
Yeah.
Dixter's
It
the one who
it
bulked up the
yeah.
Galactica.
It
You know,
doesn't
and
look as functional as it
yeah,
does on the television series, or practical to me, because
yeah,
it looks like a warship in the television series.
exactly. Yeah, it does. You
And
know,
and I
and
still can't believe the Cylons destroyed all those battle stars.
yeah.
I still can't believe that.
You'd think they'd need a lot of
Yeah, those ships are tough.
Cylon radars. You know, exactly. You know, it's like it seems like a lot. You know, you have to bring in some real, you know, power from the base ships. It's like I can't see raiders destroying all those battle stars all alone.
And we have a lot of the same loves in sci-fi. Star Trek, Battlestar Galactica, Buck Rogers. I used to really enjoy, and then that's another show they destroyed with the second season. But
Oh yeah,
yeah, I used to, and then of course one of the bigger shows that I liked was Doctor Who with Tom Baker. I was a real big fan of that.
I am. You know, at the time when Tom Baker was the Doctor, my father was a big Doctor Who fan, and I didn't like the show. Um, Unfortunately, and this is very callous on my part, because of the really low grade video,
Yeah,
special effects.
yeah,
To me, the show just looked very, very cheap.
yeah. They were
And I
definitely a
had,
little. They were like years behind in terms of visual effects.
yeah,
Uh, compare. I
and
mean, the original Star Trek had better effects.
yeah, and I'll admit now that I was a snob about that, and I thought, well, if the effects are that bad, because to me, I looked at that and I saw like Land of the Lost level special effects, and
Hey, I
it's
like Land of the Lost.
yeah. Yeah, well, so do I, but you can't say that the special effects are good. Yeah,
Well, I mean, yeah,
yeah. So, and I saw that, and I just kind of turned my nose up at it, which
yeah.
was the wrong thing to do. It was a fantastic show, and
Well, yeah,
I
it's the
learned that
stories. The
later.
stories were
Right?
really great, well
Yeah,
written, and it's amazing how that kind of just goes to show you that a special effect is basically just a tool to
exactly.
help the story. Without that story, even George Lucas has said it. A special effect is a pretty dull thing without a story behind
Without
it.
a story, yes.
And Tom Baker, man, I love that guy. Just
Yeah.
I've never really felt the same about Doctor Who since he stopped playing him.
Really?
Mm-mm.
See, we rediscovered the show when they brought it back. With Christopher Eccleston.
Yeah,
You know,
I liked it, but not as much.
yeah. I became a much bigger fan at that point. And my wife is a total Whovian.
Mm.
Julie digs that show up one side and down the other. She
See, it's
really,
kind of
really
funny.
does.
I guess I'm just more of an old school kind of guy because I
Yeah,
tend to like the older doctors
yeah,
better than the newer stuff. But I guess that's just me. Same with
yeah.
Star Trek. I like the older stuff better than the newer stuff.
Better than the newer stuff. Yeah, I know. It really kind of depends. For now, wait. If we're talking older stuff versus newer stuff, are we talking like
Original
uh,
series and maybe next gen, but the
okay,
new Deep Space Nine. But beyond that, yeah,
yeah, see, yeah, I didn't know if we were working the J.J. Abrams stuff into this or not. Yeah, so I saw you give that sideways glance. I know
yeah.
you don't want to work this. That neither do I. So we'll just drop it right now. Um, I want to say this. Except the cast that J.J. Abrams put together for those Star Trek films is incredible.
Yeah,
I
I'll
will
give them
say
that.
that the cast is amazing.
Especially Spock and McCoy.
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
I,
Zachary
I think
Quinto
I
and
think the
Yeah,
hardest casting in the newer films to me would have to be Kirk. That
yeah,
had to be the hardest one to cast.
yeah.
But
And
I
see,
could be
but
wrong.
yeah, I was really amazed at how how all those new actors who had to have been under an incredible amount of pressure just really did a good job of making the characters their own, and I believe they earned them. But as for the movies themselves, nah. But like you, I go about as far as Deep Space Nine when it comes to Star Trek. I Deep Space Nine and the original series fight for number one in my head constantly.
I don't hate Voyager and Enterprise. They're just for me. I just really can't get into them too much.
Yeah, no, we really gave both Voyager and Enterprise a chance. And for me, when Voyager became like the 7 of 9 show, that's when I left, because it just became too much about that character. And I felt that they just like left everybody else behind in favor of her and Janeway. And I'm like, no, that's not.
Well,
that's
and
not right.
For as long as that show's on the air, a lot of those characters from that show never really amounted to much of anything.
No, they didn't really.
Chakotay, Harry Kim, they really, weren't developed at all.
No, there was a great lack of development, on the show, and that's one of the reasons why, afterwards, after 7 of 9 was introduced, I was just like, I'm just not interested in this. I wish I was. I'm a huge, I'm a fan of Star Trek, but I can't. This just isn't catching my attention. And we tried the same thing with Enterprise, and it was on for 4 seasons, and we followed it for 2. And then we were both like, you know what? I really don't mind if we don't watch the show anymore. and it's like, and I honestly, I felt like I was kind of betraying Star Trek in a way, because you almost feel like you have to like these shows because they're Star Trek, and it's like, no, not if they're not working for you.
Some people do feel that way, though.
Yeah, and that's too bad, because it's like, no, if it's not working for you, it's not working for you. Although we did go back to Enterprise for the
final season.
For the episodes that were set in the mirror universe.
With the Defiant.
Yes,
those I did like.
Those were fun. Those were a lot of fun.
You just got to think, how come they couldn't have this much fun during the whole run of the show, man?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I have my own ideas on what would have made Enterprise a much better series, but this isn't a show about. We're not talking about that. We're talking about Valiant.
Yeah.
So,
but we can kind of lead off. At least we're still talking about Star Trek. But
yes.
So, let me ask you this: when you devised the battle between the Valiant and the Sukalon at the beginning of Legacy, did it take you was that a long process in terms of thinking how you wanted to do it? Were you actually inspired by the Wrath of Khan, since we do have a nebula type object in there?
Actually, to be honest, I didn't think of the Wrath of Khan at all, even though it was set inside of a nebula. I was looking at it, I was looking at it as just a space battle. The nebula was almost secondary in that regard, because since the nebula doesn't come into play as a character, or as a set piece, that was part of, in Wrath of Khan, that was part of it. That was the run silent, run deep part of, the nebula, was the leveling of the playground.
It served a purpose.
Exactly. And, for the opening scenes in Legacy, it really doesn't. It just happens to be inside of a nebula. The nebula doesn't come to be used in any way, shape, or form, really. So I just looked at it as a space battle inside the nebula. So that didn't really inform me as much as what you were writing, what you had written did, and how to put these ships in relation to one another.
In the script, was there even a mention of a nebula? I don't remember.
Yes. Yeah, in fact, it was named. It's named in the script.
Because usually when I write, I try to give as much detail as possible. Yeah. You don't have a script with just what's going on. You have detail of what's going on, visual effects notes. Because when I'm writing it, I'm thinking, well, I need to give notes to Brady, and then I need to give notes to Craig, and so I just put it all on the script.
Yeah.
I
Um,
named the
uh,
nebula. I don't even
yes,
remember naming it.
it's called the. I believe it's. I'd have to look up my files because I still have the script. I believe it was called the Negvar Nebula. It was
Uh,
Neg apostrophe capital VAR. You called it the
cool.
Negvar Nebula.
You don't
Yeah.
have hard copies of the scripts?
Actually, yes, I do. I have a signed hard copy of Legacy from you. I don't have
Okay.
copies of any of the other script.
Oh,
I
I'm
don't
gonna
have
have to
hard
get you
copies.
one to crosses the bear because I think I have like three extra.
Yeah. Um, and actually, that's one of the things that I was going to ask you one of these days was, I've got the DVD of Legacy, but I don't have DVDs of any of the other episodes.
Okay.
And I'm one of those old men that likes DVDs. I know,
I
I
do
know
too.
all the younger people watching this right now are going, what?
Why isn't this
But
in 4K?
yeah, but I like having that disc. Yeah. So instead of just having it on my computer somewhere or just on you, it's like, yeah, I can watch it anytime I want on YouTube, but I like having the disc. It's one of those, and I can
Well,
see all the ones behind you. You like having those discs as
yeah,
well.
it's
So
digital versus physical. I'd rather have physical any day.
yeah, exactly. I'm very much the same way. That's why I'm upset you can't buy CDs anymore.
Yeah.
But you
Well,
can
heck,
buy, vinyl somehow.
yeah.
Go
I kind
figure
of,
that.
sometimes I miss audio cassettes, but that's just me being weird, I guess.
I've got a huge box of them over there that I'm trying to digitize right now.
When
So
I was a
well, not
kid, I actually used to make Star Trek stories on audio cassette. So
really.
yeah, I used to put all the sound effects in. I've digitized one story that I've done on audio cassette. I'll have to
Do you
maybe release that someday.
do you think it might be good enough to adapt for Valiant?
It would be too long
Mm,
because I
the
think it's like a
guidelines.
90-minute. Yeah.
Yeah, the guidelines. That's no fun.
So was it pretty fairly easy for you to design the way the battle was set up, or was it just a
Um,
matter of specific shots?
yeah. After I got it figured out. I mean, I realized along the way, because at first I was making things a little too complicated, and then when reading the script, I realized, this is pretty straightforward. Because we're actually coming in at the tail end of the battle. The Valiant has been pummeled and
Yeah.
pounded. It's a mess. There's very little. I mean, it's just limping along. And then the Sukulon ship comes along and it delivers what seems to be the final blow to the ship. And I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm overthinking this. This should be very straightforward. And actually that I think that's pretty much how it ends up looking on screens. It's very straightforward. Is the Valiant's just limping along, and there are a couple of shots where you see the battle damage that's been done to it, and then the Sukulon fires off what it believes to be its kill shot that would destroy the Valiant, and then that's it. And I'm like, okay, it's pretty simple. It's A B C D. You know,
You
um,
know, I have two favorite shots in that battle, and one is the profile shot of the ship moving towards the right. I don't know if that rings any bells, but it's like I don't remember the dialogue before that, but it's a shot of it moving towards the right through the nebula. No fire, no other ships in the
okay,
scene. I love that shot. And then there's the one from the back where you see the Sukalon kind of coming around to face it.
yes,
And I love that shot. That's
yeah.
a really great shot.
I actually enjoy doing that shot too because again, so much of it is in shadow. It's like the Valiant is pretty much a silhouette, like off in the distance.
And it's kind of
Um,
funny. Your new shots for the special edition are pretty much what I've put to memory. Whenever I think about the
mhm,
film, I think about those new shots, and
yeah,
it's really kind of hard for me to go back and I'd have to go back and watch the original to even remember the shots now.
me too. I would too because I really don't remember, even though I've got them saved on a thumb drive.
Although I will say one thing about your original effects, that one shot when it opens and you see the Valiant going across the screen, you see the saucer and you see it pass
Yeah,
by. That's a really beautiful shot.
yeah.
Damage and all. That's just beautiful.
Yeah, the opening shot, I remember speaking to you about it because it's you the way you describe it in the script is you have the clouds of the nebula, and then you know the Valiant appears very very slowly, and it's very far away when you first
Now that's how
you
you did.
describe it
That's
as
how you
being
ended
just
up
as
doing it. That's how you ended up
yeah
doing it in the special edition.
in the special edition, exactly, yeah. And then Brady cut it so that it isn't
Yeah,
as long, because I remember emailing
yeah.
you and saying this scene is going to be really long because the ship is far away, it's damaged, it's moving
Well,
slowly,
and
and you said fine, let it be long. And I was like, okay. And then when I see it on YouTube, Brady cut it in half.
yeah, it's kind of funny because I'll send a scene to Brady, and it's like, I don't know how it's going to turn out until I see it. But
Yeah,
now you can correct me if I'm wrong, Craig. But it seemed like you were a little bit disappointed that the entire scene didn't play out.
I
Would
well
that be a
I was I was because I liked what you were setting up in the script. It's like there's just this nebula, and then there's this dot far off in the distance. And then, after a second or two, it is recognizable as a Constitution class ship. And then after a few more seconds, it's clear that there's something wrong, but you're not sure what. And it just builds and builds. And then finally, as the ship passes, you can just see it's a mess. And I really liked how it kind of built this suspense. It was like, this if you want to equate it to a ship, a seafaring ship coming out of the fog, and you're like, oh look, there's another ship off there on the horizon, and then within a few seconds it's this, you see, oh, it's got masts on it, it's an old ship. And then as it gets
well?
closer, it's like it's
Yeah,
tattered up, it's a ghost ship. It's I love that build. And then when he cut it, and I understand why he cut it, I don't hold it against him. I'm sure he was looking at it and going, this is way too long.
yeah, yeah.
um,
And honestly, I remember. I could tell that you were kind of disappointed that it was cut. And I remember having a conversation with Brady, and I said, "Well, Brady, is there any way we can lengthen this scene because Craig spent some time doing this
yeah,
scene, and if we can get as much as possible in." But he just felt like it didn't work in terms
yeah,
of a narrative, that it was too long. But from I remember writing that scene, and it was kind of like you described it, just building up. You see a starship coming, but as it gets closer and closer, you see something's really dramatically
yeah,
wrong with this ship. And I mean, it does seem like even now it sounds like a good thing. It sounds like a
yeah,
really a dramatic kind of reveal.
yeah. And I still have the original. So like I said, I certainly don't
Well,
fault. Great Brady's
something
the editor. He.
and there's lots of times when like I was telling the story about the goat man, how I Nate had
Right.
spent like several hours on it, but we only see a couple of shots of it in the film. And I had that conversation with Brady, can we have the
Yeah.
goat guy in the scene a little bit? And it didn't work out that way. But uh I actually used that entire visual effect when Vance had he was having he called it a promenadicon, and all the fan filmmakers that were going to be there had to submit a video kind of advertising their show. And I
Yeah.
used that whole shot in the video that I made. I don't think you ever seen it because
No.
I sent
Yeah.
it to Vance and he used it, but
Okay.
I've still got a copy of it. I did use that entire scene.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I'm glad it got used. And like I said, Brady, I hold nothing against you at all. I understand editors cut scenes. Another, one of my favorite shots is something that I put together myself. It wasn't even in the script for Legacy. Um, it was supposed to be like a final shot
I remember of the ship
of the
in dry
ship
dock.
in dry dock, where we see the side of the secondary hull, and it says USS Valiant on the side, and the camera pulls around and back, and we see the ship in dry dock, and a shuttle flies into the hangar bay, and the doors close. And I thought that would be that. I just thought, wow, that'd just be an awesome final shot after Kennedy has her last line, because then you can have this like nice music build up before it's like you have Kennedy say her last line. You have this really nice shot of the Valiant obviously coming back to life again, and there's this crescendo, and you go to end credits, and I thought, oh, that's perfect, and it ended up not being used, and I'm like, oh, well, that's but I get it, at the same
And
time, it's like,
I ended up posting it as an unused effect on the Valiant page.
yeah,
But
yeah,
originally when we got that scene, which as far as the way it looked, it was a beautiful shot. I
thank
mean,
you.
you can go see that scene where it's posted, and people are just like, think it's a really good shot.
Yeah.
And I remember we had two. We had the one where Kennedy just sits in the chair and it ends, and
Mm-hmm.
then we had one where she sits in the chair and then we see the outside of the Valiant, and I guess I have to say maybe that's a little bit of my decision. I thought the way it ended with Kennedy was
Yeah.
just a little bit stronger.
Yeah. Exactly.
And
And I get that, And like I said, it was just one of those things that I thought up and tossed over to you guys. And it's like, if
but
you use it,
sometimes it hurts though when sometimes you want two things
yeah,
and you only have one. So
right.
it's the effect though, all the effects of the ship in the dry dock, for some reason all those effects looked really, really good. I don't
I
know if it's
really,
what's the deal with that? Is it just because it's in a dry dock or
I think the shadows playing across the hull of the ship.
it's like that it's like that effect you did where, and I don't know what this effect was for, but the shot where you have the Valiant pulling into the dry dock, it wasn't for any specific film, I don't believe.
No, that was we were testing out ideas for opening credits.
And I look at that scene and I see all those different shadows and all that, and I'm thinking, God, that's a lot. That looks really complicated to me.
Yeah, and it is in a certain respect, because like I said, like I said before, whenever you have a CG model moving through light like that, calculations have to go on, and it takes a lot longer to render a single frame than it would if things are just kind of static.
And I honestly got to say that's probably one of the best visual effects you've done.
Thank you.
And the more it pulls in, the more detail and all that you see. It's just really, it's like a visual effect that I never wanted to end. It just looks so good.
Yeah, and I know the one that you're talking about was because I had sent you. We were playing with ideas for opening credit scenes. So I was just putting stuff together, and I had thought of this idea of the Valiant pulling into dry dock, and it's just complete and utter blackness. There's no planet, there's no stars. It's just black, and the camera is positioned behind the Valiant, so it's all in silhouette. And it's as it moves into dry dock, and then it's slowly, as it moves under the lights of the dry dock, it slowly is illuminated. And I really liked the way it turned out. And you said, can you give me that shot from the front so we can see the ship pulling in to the dry dock? And I was like, well, sure, all I got to do is throw another camera into the scene. And that scene worked just as well, because the ship is you almost can't see it at first because it's so dark, and then it starts moving into the lights of the dry dock, and then all those shadows just start playing across the hull. And I think that's one of the things that's so evocative about dry dock shots, is those shadows playing across the hull.
That shot, to me, that the first time I saw it, I'm just like thinking, that's amazing. All those different light sources and shadows on the ship. It just makes it look, it makes it look like it's really inside something.
Yeah, it's fun. It really is. It's as time consuming as those can be, they're a lot of fun to do. And when they turn out right, you just an effects artist can just jump for joy when they turn out right.
By that point, when you did that, was that just one exercise, or did you have to go back and redo it again, or did you get it right the first time?
That was one that I got right the first time.
Wow.
Because I knew exactly how I wanted it to look. So It was, yeah, it was easy. It was just like, yeah, I've got one key light, which would be the sun, which you can't see in the shot, and then the lights that are inside the dry dock, and the lights that are on the Valiant, and that's it. So I'm like, okay, and then like placing the camera was easy because I'm like, all I have to do is place it opposite where the key light source is. So I'm like, and then let things go, and then just move the ships, or just move the Valiant into the dry dock, So it was, in that sense, it was fairly straightforward, and it turned out looking exactly the way I wanted it to, which was nice because just about every effect that I have ever sent to you has honestly been like probably like a fifth or sixth draft. So anything that I have ever sent to you that I consider to be done, unless unless you end up asking for changes, is actually many times like a fifth or sixth draft, and you don't see like the first three because I'm like, no, I'm not even going to show him this because this is awful. This just did not turn out the way I wanted it to turn out. So
and,
it gets deleted, it gets not spoken of, it's just gone.
in between Legacy and Crosses to Bear, you sent that visual effect that was kind of like taken from Star Trek: The Motion Picture, where the end scene where it warps out.
Yes.
Oh man,
The Valiant adventure is just beginning.
Yeah, that was just a great shot, man. That every bit of that visual effect was just epic.
That was so much fun, despite how difficult it was.
It did look like to me that took some time.
It did. That camera move that comes at the end of Star Trek: The Motion Picture is unbelievably complex because the camera is moving underneath the ship, and then as it moves down to like where the secondary hull is, it starts to turn and then angle up behind the ship, and trying to get that kind of a movement was just it drove me nuts. It really did. It drove me crazy. It drove me crazy because I'm like, okay, here's where the camera has to start to turn, but at the same time it's angling, but I've got to keep the ship in shot. And with the sometimes with 3D Studio Max, the cameras don't always do what you want them to do. You have to bargain with them a little bit sometimes. So it took a while for me to figure it out, but then when I did, I was really happy with how it turned out.
That was beautiful.
Yeah.
Totally beautiful. I still look at that effect sometimes.
Is that online? Is that on YouTube?
It's on Facebook.
Oh, okay. You have
in
it
the
on
video
Facebook.
section.
Okay.
I've never put that on YouTube.
Yeah.
I need to. I think maybe one of the reasons I didn't put it on YouTube was because I put the music in,
Yes.
and it would have got a copyright strike or something.
Yeah.
But once I put the music in and the sound effects, it's like, wow.
Yeah.
That
it worked
music
out
is just,
really, really well.
that music in that scene is just great too.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, that crescendo at the end, I mean, just that shot of the Enterprise at the end of Star Trek: The Motion Picture is astoundingly beautiful and really shows the scale of the ship.
You've got to redo that scene with your new model.
With the new one. I've been thinking about that, actually.
That would be epic.
Yeah. I have been thinking about that. That is not a bad idea.
And that one shot touches so many CGI artists because that's one scene that like everybody has done.
Mm-hmm.
They love that shot.
Yeah. It's a fantastic shot. It really is. I mean, it's very evocative, and once you get those camera moves figured out, you're just so proud of yourself.
I literally, when I watched it after the effects and the music was added, I got chills watching it. That's just how that CGI there. It's amazing how CGI art can affect you.
Yeah, I know. It's
just as powerful a storyteller as actors and actresses.
Yeah, it can be, and sometimes especially for me, because I consider myself an eternal journeyman when it comes to CG. I'm always learning. I haven't got anything really figured out. I've constantly got to come up with a way to do things. It seems, when it comes together and I get it right, I do have an emotional response to it. When I see the render finally and it looks good and it does what I wanted it to do, I get the same thing. I do get an emotional response
So how did
from
it
it.
feel? Speaking of emotional responses, once you went into Valiant, you decided to become a part of it, but in your mind you had to be thinking, well, I'm not for sure if it'll get done. But how did it feel once you actually saw it was done and your effects were in it?
I I was elated. I could not wait for it, especially the special edition, because that was, since we got a chance to tweak things a little bit. I was like, but even the first one, I was really elated when I was itching for it to come out because I wanted to see how I had never tried to integrate my CG effects with live action before. And I wanted to see if it worked because a lot of times what happens is CG effects will look a little too cartoony. They won't look real enough, and there is a little of that in Legacy, but not as much as I was afraid that there might be.
What
Um,
would you say? Would you I think I know the scenes you're talking about, but would you say that's mainly they don't look cartoony, but is it because they're contrasting with what they're in, or
yes,
what? Yeah,
exactly.
I think it's the light or the nebula scenes. Is that the one you're talking about?
Well, it does. Well, actually, just like in general, it's like since I don't have access to a lot of tools that other CGI artists might have in terms of post production work on their on the scenes that they generate, to make things look more realistic. Um, I sometimes worry that my stuff will look very CG, and it will good CG, but still not realistic enough to pair with the live action. And that was what I was most nervous about before Legacy came out. And that really didn't happen. And one of the things that really sold me again was the scene where Bishop is speaking to the Admiral via the comlink in his apartment, because that background is the background behind her is completely computer generated. The room that she's in is computer generated. The ships flying outside are all computer
Yeah.
generated. And then there's the background shot of Starfleet. You know, um, and it looked real. And I was just like, I hit the ceiling at that point. I was so thrilled. I'm like, it looks like she's really sitting in that room, and it looks
Yep.
like a real room. Okay, I am so
Yeah.
satisfied at this point.
That's one of those scenes that all the elements just mix together perfectly.
Yeah, I threw just about every small Star Trek craft I could into that scene, into what's passing behind
Yeah,
her
if I
through the
think
window.
I can remember several uh Constitution shuttles. I even remember a Vulcan shuttle.
Yeah, there's
The
yeah.
Starbird.
Yes, the Starbird does make an appearance very,
And
very quickly.
I remember you asking me, "Hey, do you mind if I put this in there?" And I'm thinking,
Yeah,
what is this guy asking me this for? Of
yeah,
course, go ahead,
yeah,
man.
yeah. Well, because I had sent, because I really didn't know, since I didn't know how you were going to shoot the scenes, I didn't know how much time you'd need for a background. So I sent, I must have sent, you know, a couple minutes worth of background, of that room. So I had ships passing back and
And
forth,
and
all the
and
time.
being the perfectionist you are, you also sent several still pictures with different backgrounds to use in that scene.
Yeah,
you sent like maybe 4 different shots of Shirley that you'd put together. I mean, you put together these really nice wallpaper
Yeah,
pictures of Shirley sitting in different backgrounds. And there was one that I liked that was really TOS. But Brady thought that the one that he used in the film worked the best. And I think
yeah,
that was probably the best choice because that one
yeah.
looks really good.
You want a fun little piece of trivia on that room?
Yes.
The room that Shirley is sitting in in Legacy when she's speaking with Bishop is modeled after um, the officers' lounge from Star Trek: The Motion Picture,
Mm,
where Kirk, McCoy, and Spock are having their first discussion about V'ger.
mm-hmm.
It's I modeled that room, the one I created on that room, but I just made it look like you know original, like it came from the original series. The slight
And you know,
bluishness to the walls and
I
that
think
sort of thing.
you actually sent a wallpaper of her sitting in a
Mm-hmm.
room like that. And another thing that kind of helps too is how Brady kind of blurred the background
Yeah,
to give Shirley like she's in the forefront. And that
yeah,
really to me kind of added to the realism of it too, because that's a scene that to me anyway just looks totally like you could see that on any TV show today. So
yeah. But
that's an
that's what
effect that really holds up.
Yeah, but that's the shot. That scene is like, okay, I can do this.
Is
I
that
can
your
do
favorite
this.
shot in the film? Would you say?
It I it's my favorite in the sense that it sneaks past you. You don't really think about
Well,
it too much.
yeah, they say the best visual effects are the one that you don't really think about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And that's what I like about it is that it is very natural looking. Um, the best special effects artists in the world, and any audience member, when you're watching a spaceship battle, that spaceship battle is not actually happening. It's CG or it's physical models, it's something, but it is not a real space battle. If somebody is sitting in a room, your brain expects that room to be real. And if it isn't and you don't notice it, that's a win for
You
for me. That's
you're
what I
wanting me,
see as a win.
you're making me want to go back and watch that scene now. But you know the funny thing about that scene is before all the visual effects, she's sitting in the garage in front of a green screen on a desk that's all scuffed up.
Yeah, I've seen the behind the scenes shots, and that's actually that's the magic of film.
Yep.
That's the magic of film, video, digital, whatever you happen to be using, is that you take all of this stuff that isn't what it is, and you make it into something. You know,
And
um, and that's when it works, when it comes together and it works, that's magic. It really is.
and you know some of your effects are the ones that are just really subtle that are really kind of effective, like when Bishop's on the bridge and you have the space dock in the background.
Yeah,
Now I remember when Brady put that together, I kind of said, maybe we should use a shot where there's a little bit more little ships flying around. And his answer was, well, I think if we have too much moving in the background, it'll distract the people. So we'll just kind of have one ship go by.
yeah,
And I think that makes sense. And that just goes to show you, I'm learning as we go. So,
yeah,
that's why I depended on you and Brady to know what works and what doesn't work, because one thing about your visual effects to me is that, like the original series, you're really practical when it comes to effects. You don't just overindulge. And I see a lot of fan films that just have all this stuff going
oh
on
yeah,
that it's not really necessary to the story. You're really practical when it comes to effects. You put in what needs to be put in, and you don't really just go over the top and just put
yeah,
things in it just for the sake of putting things in it.
yeah. I
Like
try to have.
there's a lot of visual effects artists that are thinking, oh yeah, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to put this in, but it's not needed, and you're really
Yeah,
practical about it.
yeah. The For me, the story elements always have to come well before any cool factor, any kind of cooler or wow factor. When it comes to visual, when it comes to the CG effects, I don't want to do anything just for the wow factor. It's like, no, I'm not gonna. I don't want to do an effect or do a sequence just because it looks cool. It's got to mean something, so and I think sometimes that works to my detriment because then I'll think a little too linearly. Whereas, if you look at, say, some of my special effects shots versus Brady's from Animals, I really liked what Brady did, you know, because he put a certain like dynamic in the camera movements that I tend not to do. So my camera movements tend to be a little more straightforward. But his camera movements are a little more, they're a little more fast and loose, I might say, and I really like that. I'm like, you know what, I might try to incorporate that into my stuff moving forward because I really like the way it looked. Whereas not that I lock off the camera, but I'll just keep it moving along a certain path. Whereas he seemed to allow his a little bit more free form movement, and I really like that a lot. I was really interested to see what he did with the effects, and I was so sorry I couldn't do them for Animals. But I
it
was.
it really would be interesting to see how you would have done the shots, though.
That would be interesting.
Yeah,
If
that would really.
if it weren't a completely moot point now, I might
Well,
take something
maybe
like that up.
maybe we
But
could do a Craig Frey cut.
yeah, maybe that would. Well, you said you might do a director's cut. Maybe I'll get to do the effects for that one. But Brady did a spectacular job. The models looked amazing. Under his guidance.
Just to jump the gun right quick. On the Dragon ship, was that your design?
That is sort of my design. I was actually building another model, one that's not very well known. Um, it's do you know the film Event Horizon?
Yes.
Okay, I was building the Event Horizon,
That would
and
be
I
a
was.
wow. That's a heck of a endeavor.
Yes, it is. And that was just it. I ended up not building the Event Horizon because it ended up being quite an endeavor. But I had started with the back of the ship because that was the easiest part to do. Um, and that's as far as I got before I started working on other parts, and it just wasn't coming together. That ship is so complex, and so I gave it up. But I still had that back end, and I was started looking at it, and I'm like, you know what, this would make a decent ship all on its own. So I flipped it horizontally 180 degrees and I took a lot of stuff off and I'll put other stuff on. So really the only thing that survives from the Event Horizon is like the spherical, the spherical hull and like the tube that runs through the center of it. Everything else
Oh,
is
I,
stuff
I
that
would
I
say
had
that's
placed
your
on it.
design then.
Yeah, everything else I had placed on it. And especially like, I added the rings for the Dragon, ring weapon. I added those rings surrounding, the plates. But it's just one of those things where I was looking at it one day and I was thinking, well, since I'm not going to finish this, I'll delete it. But then something in my brain clicked and said, no, you know what? There's a ship here. Smaller, certainly, but if you just work with it a little bit, you'll have a decent design. And so that's what I did. So it came out of a discarded project, to build a ship that was already established, but you managed to make it your own simply by saying, okay, well, my ship doesn't need this. I'll add this, I'll switch this around. I'll move this part. I'll add these parts. And all of a sudden you've got, your own ship, ask any physical model builder how many of their models came from
Inspiration from others.
yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, this model I have of the B-29 could easily be something else if I slice off the wings and add these other parts to it instead. So, and just about every physical modeler's done that, and every CG modeler's done it too. So they did it all the time on the Next Generation. Um, just added greebly bits to a model that they used last season.
Mm.
It became, it went from being this race's ship to that race's ship as well. So
Kit bash.
kit bashing. That's the word I was looking for. Thank you. Yes.